Hello. All right. Hello, everyone. It's July 28th, 2025. I'm your host, Dan, of Dan's Astrology, here to do another astrology video. Um, the planet I'm focusing on today, or the aspect I'm focusing on today, is basically Venus, which is in the late degrees of Gemini as I record this video. And around the end of the month, Venus will be ingressing into the first decan of Cancer, from which it will make a square aspect to the planets Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Also, co-present with Venus in Cancer is the planet Jupiter, which happens to be in its exaltation in Cancer. And this will also lead into a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in that sign later on, which is interesting because with Jupiter exalted and Venus, both Jupiter and Venus are the traditional benefics. So you've got a concentration of benefic planets in one sign, meaning that there should be some kind of positive development in respect to what that sign signifies in your chart. I'm not going to break that down right now, but there is also, unfortunately, though, the square to Saturn and Neptune. And since Saturn and Neptune are in the overcoming position, we have to think about what kind of expectations we have for the gains or good things that are happening and keep our expectations moderate, not to expect too much from this transit, because there's a certain we have to be realistic basically about the situation we're in and what kind of gains or what kind of successes are realistic within the context of the situation. However, there's things to watch out for, pitfalls and traps, perhaps, such as the problem of, I would say, depressive realism, right? Where there's this idea that the idea, which I was kind of getting at with my last video, where in the process of what I was trying to talk about, I think I hit upon a certain quality which I would describe as gas station Hegelianism, which is basically this kind of depressive realism where you kind of you get your feet on the ground and start at this like most basic common reality of what is around you, right? And if basically it's kind of like if the only thing in your neighborhood is a shitty gas station, you start there and you just have to be like, well, this is life, this is reality. It's just like pumping gas at the shitty gas station, drinking the gas station coffee, selling cigarettes to people. Like there's no meaning except for this. So I just have to like give in to the smallest little thing, and then this is what reality is like, right? And then, but there's like some kind of thing about the lack of and you have to do that because you have a lack of imagination to do anything else, right? Like there's you have to fall into this common shared thing that doesn't really allow you any flexibility to be creative or do different things. You just have to take the jump, you have to trim your tall poppies and go into the lowest common denominator of what is socially acceptable, and in a very kind of self-righteous, self-sacrificing way, right? Where you sacrifice your dreams and just get on with it and become the gas station pumping employee, and that's your path to success, basically, right? I think there's something about, in contrast, trying to do an astrology channel is kind of different from that, or trying to be like an artist is kind of different from that. There's some kind of thing that there seems to be a kind of a polarization in which there's a bit of a attraction away from that to something else, even if it may not be practical or grounded, or maybe you just want to I don't know, read a bunch of comic books or something like that. And if there's a fantasy of Neptune. You're like, I don't, I want to be able to dream bigger than the gas station Hegelianism. I want to envision something a little bit better than that, right? I don't want to get stuck as the nihilistic, cynical, True Detective guy who just takes to smoking and drinking and giving himself over to the addiction of like paranoid conspiracy theories and stuff like that, right? Or also saying that like if there's if you want to involve yourself in a certain creative project, certain creative pursuit, you have to look at what is already successful and then stick within that framework of what works, and then you'll quickly rise to success, as long as you fit yourself into this kind of narrow, constricting thing, which is kind of depressing, which doesn't give you much room to work with, right? Well, I have to realize though that there are I have to also take account for my own personality, my own, there's maybe certain ways where Saturn, right? There's something about Saturn which tends to be cynical, like an old man, like kind of cranky, which doesn't give you much room to work with, which doesn't give you much options, right? And at least one of the things that you can fit in that framework is that you can, instead of trying to manifest those dreams in reality, you can at least read some comic books, play some video games, do things like that. There's something about also the coding of this where it's like to be full of dreams and vision and ambition is seemed to be kind of childish and naive, and it's like a sign of maturity to basically abandon the child, to give up the dream, to accept the depressing reality of life where you're just going to be like a shitty gas station employee, and that to try to strive towards higher things like art or spirit, it's kind of pretentious or whatever, right? So there's this kind of like in that whole dynamic, there's an archetype which is set off, I would argue, by these placements, because going all the way back to traditional Hellenistic astrology, there's Manilius in his Astronomica defines Aries, the sign of the ram, as having to do with youth, right? It's because it's in the northern hemisphere. Aries season is the sign of spring, and is a sign of like young things, new beginnings, all this kind of stuff. There's a youthful, and in youth you have this ambition, you have the energy of youth, you have your whole life ahead of you, you're gonna do something, you got the energy, you got the dream, you got the vision, you want to do it, right? But here we have youth in contrast with the Saturn-Neptune lack of imagination, lack of vision. And I've also, it's also interesting, based on the current events, I was motivated by the current drama between Rupert Murdoch and Donald Trump. There's kind of a media war going on right now, that apparently the whole popular HBO TV show series Succession is based on Rupert Murdoch. So I've been getting into watching that, which has been kind of interesting. Just in light of all the stuff that's going on, it's kind of like a bit of an eye opener, I would say. And but it goes back to this whole thing of like, imagine Succession, where you've got Murdoch, who's the guy who owns Fox News, who owns the Wall Street Journal, who owns the New York Times, who owns all these different, he owns a lot of the old guard of what defines the media. It's like, what's interesting is that the whole thing about the melodrama of the children and trying to gain power and the family dynamic is less interesting to me compared to the fact that our whole media landscape is actually very much defined by these powerful oligarchs who have a kind of like Ayn Randian mentality, where we are the oligarch people to structure and define what society is like, but they also are these increasingly aging, senile people that have a lack of imagination, who seem stuck in a very depressing, kind of nihilistic, cynical vision of the world, right? And that but I also have to admit that I have my own brand of cynicism and skepticism, and perhaps overly like there's you maybe I don't know, you could, if you really wanted to break this down into astrology, you could look at how different Saturn Neptune aspects, where I also have something that attracts me to art and trying to be creative and trying to think outside the box. But there's some kind of thing where when it comes to what I don't want to, first of all, to get this straight, I don't think it's a good idea for me to be outright hostile towards other astrologers, but there's a certain kind of thing about what the status quo of what might get most popular with astrology that is, maybe if you think about Rupert Murdoch and you think about how powerful Rupert Murdoch is and how powerful Fox News is and how powerful that whole media empire is, or like the kind of the lowest common denominator of selling like gossip columns and like tabloid news and like things which are like, is this real or is this just bullshit? Like, I think there's this is what I'm trying to get with Saturn-Neptune, is that there could be a certain bullshit factor dynamic or a cynicism that goes with not believing things that are bullshit. And I'm gonna give like I'm gonna weave all this together in a certain way, right? Because there's something about the ability to dream, to envision, to have an imagination, versus being old and senile and cynical, or also just filling people's imaginations with garbage and trash and like fake gossip stuff that's like, why waste so much energy on that stuff, right? There's something about all of it. But then there's also this other, when you get into, let's say, more fantastic stuff about like UFOs and aliens or conspiracies or something like that, you get this sort of like the need for Mulder Scully kind of rational, you can't just believe everything you read. You have to make some discernment. You need to like separate the wheat from the chaff. You need to like sort things out, kind of thing. There's at least some there's some kind of dynamic with this too, where the problem with lack of imagination, or I'm basically continuing off of my video. I kind of introduced some of these ideas in my last video, but there's this like, Venus is obviously has to do with aesthetics, has to do with beauty, has to do with harmonious decorating or music or things like that. But then it's in this clash of a square to Saturn and Neptune, which there is this Neptunian thing. I mean, you could maybe some melancholy music to express some of the different different emotions of life or something. There's some in that, and the thing about, there's something about the imagination of childhood that for some reason, when it comes to the topic of dreams, I have this thing where I always have these memories of dreams that I had when I was a little kid that seem very vivid, or that seem to have made an impression on me, but also seem connected with things like, there's a certain dark quality to some of the dreams that are, I don't really feel like getting into the specifics of the dreams, but there's certain qualities of the dreams that resonate with things like H.R. Geiger, or like cyberpunk Blade Runner stuff, or things to do with like aliens or something. And there's something about those dreams which is a bit of a chicken and egg situation, where it's kind of like, because apparently H.R. Geiger had, his art was actually influenced, or as a way, like he had all these nightmares and bad dreams, and that his art was a way to somehow sort of express these dark visions that he had. And that there's something about my own dreams where it's like, was I just running into that same territory in the psyche in my dreams as a child, or was that somehow influenced by things like the movie Alien, being out there in the collective imagination, or the movie Blade Runner being out there in the collective imagination, and just like stuff that was just circulating around that I was picking up on, and then I was dreaming, or was it like the original vision that the thing is, like, now it's kind of like it's mixed up because the artists have already expressed this, and now it's something you can't, you're like, you're pointing to this, is this something that an artist came up with, or is this something that is something original from the psyche and stuff like that. And I'm using this as a way to introduce something. And an important factor here is that these dreams that I had as a child, which had those qualities to them, are connected in some way through that reference to popular Hollywood movies, and that there were some of these movies came out of the whole Jodorowsky Dune project, which Jodorowsky's Dune was overly ambitious. It was I mean, I don't know how many of you have watched the documentary on Jodorowsky's Dune. If you have already watched that documentary, it will save me a lot of time because I don't have to explain the fact that Jodorowsky hired a number of people, namely H.R. Geiger and also this comic book writer Moebius, for his project. And there's something I've been a fan of Moebius for a long time, probably even before I watched Jodorowsky's Dune. And but it was kind of something about, like, it was more like, I don't know, like Tumblr or something like that, or just like finding images online and just like collecting Moebius wallpapers, and then just like, it took me a long time to be like, wait a minute, why don't I actually read some Moebius comic books? And so I have started reading this one, Moebius's Edena series, and I had the experience of reading this. I was reading this on a sunny day on my back deck, and I was having my mind blown basically by how great this is. And then eventually I was interrupted by a crow shitting on my head, where it was like, I've never had a crow, maybe I've been hit by a bird shit once or twice before in my life, but I've never had it just land square on my head while I was in the midst of reading a comic book. So take that as, I don't know if that's an omen or a sign, but take that for what it is. There's some sort of risk of getting shit on by crows if you're reading Moebius. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but I'm going to, at least with that in mind, there's a couple of things one of the things that I found mind-blowing about this was that in the first comic book, there is this guy there's a spaceship in which there is a guy who is like the driver, or there's like, you know in Alien how they have the navigator, who is this guy who is like a biomechanical being who is like part man, but he's also like built into the spaceship. And it's like, in Moebius, check this out. Did Moebius come up with the idea first? That was H.R. Geiger just ripping off Moebius? Or was it because these guys are both hired by Jodorowsky on the same project? Oh, my camera is messed up now. Okay, you're gonna have to deal with me being all blurry because I messed it up. Okay. Anyways, so that is one of them. The other one that I'm going to show you is that I have to admit, well, I'm just going to, maybe I can fix my blurry camera by showing you this other image here, which was to nail the point home, is that while there are certain things that other astrologers might get into that I kind of scoff at or show skepticism to, I was kind of taken away by this particular image. Check this out. Is this in focus? Do you see this? Do you see the pyramid that has these cylinders underneath it? Maybe this is like suitable for Saturn-Neptune, in that the previously clear camera has been put out of focus here by me trying to show off comic books, and now it's all blurry and out of focus. But this is basically, oh my god, this kind of, Um, maybe you see the point. Was this too much for an astrology video to expose? Anyways, I don't know what to make of this because basically, to put it straightforward, there are certain astrologers that I have met and collaborated with before, or other astrologers that I just passively watch their videos. And honestly, when there's the stuff about like, most, I think the scientists, there's some sort of news story going around where somebody did a scan underneath the pyramids and apparently found evidence of these cylinders. And then, but there's a lot of scientists who are saying that this is kind of fake or phony, or this was, it's been debunked basically. But then this, regardless of whether it's not literally real or not, is there something curious about the fact that in that Moebius comic book, he draws an illustration that is basically exactly the same as what these scientists, whether or not they found it or not, Moebius was onto it, and then whether or not, and then there's this whole thing about put it in the context of the young child dreaming in the context of the biomechanical thing, and having there's some sort of message in that Moebius book about trying to restore the imagination of the children from being like, there's a certain darkness to there's a certain original idea of these creative people, and then there's like what you get in Hollywood. Right. Another example of this, I think, is a great example, is the Fifth Element, which is like basically they ripped off Jodorowsky and Moebius's The Incal. Like, if you read The Incal, it's like like Hollywood, they basically just took the idea and distorted it in a certain way in which to make it marketable to the American Hollywood entertainment industry, right? And if you kind of take what's in the comic book and measure that against what the Fifth Element is like, it's fairly obvious like what kinds of changes you have to make to take an original idea and make it for something that is suitable for mass consumption for an American dominated audience. And it's like, I think it's like those kinds of constraints are what create our depressing gas station Hegel world, where it's like, if you have any creative ambition, you have to just accept the shittiness of the situation, where we have a world ruled basically by people like Donald Trump, or people like where you have this sort of like illusion of choice, or an illusion of creativity, or illusion of that is arrested into this thing, which is feels very restrictive, feels very depressing, which can give rise to a lot of cynicism, or you're either cynically opposed to it, or you're caught in a state of like depressive realism, which is like, in order to be realistic about life, you have to like imagine the most depressing possible outlook, and then be like, how do I cope with that? And that's how to live realistically, right? And then otherwise you need your wings clipped, you need the tall poppies trimmed, all that kind of stuff, right? But there is this sort of, at least with, I don't know, there's something about the Venus going into Cancer with Jupiter, and with the Saturn and Neptune, that there's some kind of like, despite the depressing restrictions, despite the depressing limitations, there's some stimulation of the imagination. I would also just like to recommend this game called Sable while I'm at it, which is based on the Moebius universe. Although, I don't know. Sable's kind of fun because if you get into the Moebius aesthetic, Sable basically makes you feel like you're living in Moebius land. Although, to be fair, it's only maybe like 50% there. There's like a lot of like, there's another game that I've been thinking about playing called, or no, I was playing it earlier but I haven't played it in a while, called No Man's Sky. Which is, there's also this interesting thing because there's something in the news now about there's some comet traveling towards Earth, and similar to the sort of news cycle thing about how they have all these wacky scientists who think that there's cylinders underneath the pyramids, there's some other wacky that is this a comet or is it actually an alien spaceship or alien technology flying towards Earth? And there's something about the use of the name Atlas in that in this game No Man's Sky. There's the Atlas. There's some kind of the Atlas aliens who are like you in this game. You dock your spaceship in these weird Atlas space station things, and by docking your spaceship there, they give you map information for parts of the galaxy or whatever. And it's like there are these strange like ancient aliens who go around mapping things. And there's like I don't know why they chose the name Atlas for this comet, but like the whole. This is the kind of thing. It's like it could be fake, but there's also these weird like synchronicities with people who are like coming up with ideas for video games or people who are writing comics, and it's like there's something about like the struggle for original ideas, or that there's some kind of like you're either like you're naively gullible, you're like this childish innocence, you're like reading like watching fantasy shows or like Saturday morning cartoons and just believing everything you read, or else you're like some jaded cynical like nothing, it's all bullshit, it's all, and then I just have to work at the gas station and just like have no imagination about anything, right? And like these kind of those kind of polarities, or you cope with that by just getting fuzzed out, right? Like I feel like there's a certain fuzzification happening with my the fact that I can't get my camera to focus after showing off that comic book, which may be part another a symbolic thing. Thanks for watching this. Maybe it works as audio, even if you're not. Maybe I can. I don't know. Maybe this is why people use. I don't know. I have a different pace of producing videos where instead of having an elaborate post-production process, I'm just recording fairly raw stuff and uploading it and showing you pictures out of a book. If I was really there's something about the video essay style which I'm a little bit opposed to, which maybe goes with this whole. Marshall McLuhan was talking about how after each new kind of technology, there's this sort of like numbing out that happens, right? That like, and I think that I'm basically in my own family, I can kind of see this with the, there's something about, it's kind of suspicious when the phone company is so eager to install high-speed fiber optic cables everywhere, and it's like now we have access to like the biggest more high-speed internet data stream than ever before, and it's like we're all just shell-shocked basically, right? We're all just like, oh, we can't do anything, we're just like too much internet, right? I don't know if it's kind of an overly simplistic analysis of it, but it's like I kind of think it's true because there's all sorts of things which should be fairly like it seems like we should have more, energy or creative capacity to work with the situation in our life, but instead, like our whole imagination and our whole faculties have basically been held hostage or like it's not even held hostage. It's like we've been going from eating like a very light diet to eating like huge like food coma inducing meals because we have so much input coming in, and then we're all in this kind of state of like the coma after eating too much food where we're just like knocked out and like nobody can do anything because we just have like so much information coming in all the time. And it's like to the point where it's like and I think this is why I prefer not to make highly aesthetic videos, is because it's like it kind of creates, it's like it makes it feel like watching 5 minutes of a video is like eating like a really calorie rich cheesecake, and you're like, oh, I'm good for the whole day now. I guess I have to go and work at the shitty gas station and not have an imagination and not think about how I can have any creative control over my life. I just have to like, I've just had my imagination just fucking burnt the fuck out from these stupid fucking videos where people are like, whoa man, there's cylinders underneath the fucking pyramids, dude, whoa. And it's like great man, let's just fucking, let's just be a burnout gas station employee. Yeah, it sounds great, right? And like have no political agency, political power. Nobody takes you seriously, and just watch the most bogus garbage bullshit during your smoko, right? Like that. This kind of feels like what it feels like to me. And then like there's at least though, you know, I think the silver lining is that there's like this kind of stuff is like, it feels like you're getting more to the source of like the original creativity, right? And oh look, I fixed it. I managed to get my camera to focus. That okay. Thank you for putting up with the poor recording quality of me trying to show off Moebius comic books. Now that again, I don't know. Okay, before we close, check this out. Look at this. It's like the pyramid, the cylinders. Yeah, do you think the pyramids are gonna, like, when the aliens come, the pyramids are just gonna turn into spaceships that like launch off, and like the cylinders are like gonna be these like interdimensional, like, you know, like this is basically, this is kind of like the level most other astrologers seem to be at, is like they just take that and just like, rather than having any critical discernment about what's true or false, they're just like, yeah, sign me up, baby. We're gonna make a little TikTok video where we're just gonna have this image, and I'm like, I've got all these synthesizers, right? This is basically what my creative challenges is. Like, I could just take this idea, you know, spend a bunch of time playing with my synthesizers and create some sort of like highly aestheticized thing that is just like this like cocaine cheesecake that you're just going to be like, it's going to be like, whoa, the aliens sent a photon torpedo straight to my brain and blew up my imagination. Now I can't think about anything. I guess I'll just work at the fucking gas station and sell cigarettes to people, right? Like, this is kind of what it feels like. So, okay, that's my idea for today. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if you think I should just work at a gas station rather than making dumb astrology videos. Thanks for watching.